Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, an ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random order. I am Pete Paschal.
And I'm Chris Taylor, and we are both journalists who've written extensively about Doctor Who, but more importantly, we're fans from childhood who love to nerd out about the show.
Indeed. Nerd out randomly in random order about any episode you could put in front of us.
Which is really exciting. I have to say, I'm loving this format. I'm loving that we are about to talk about our very first Hartnell episode. And that was a wild thing to go to. I mean, how many episodes have we done so far, Pete? Are you familiar with where we're at?
It's a good question. I think we're at about, in terms of when we started the randomizer, we're at about 10, maybe a dozen.
Yeah,
I might be overcounting there a bit.
Because what we watched was the 12th story in the history, the whole history of Doctor Who. This was number 12. So had we started at podcast 1 with an unearthly child, we'd be here anyway. So that's
oh my god! That never even occurred to me. You're right.
Yeah, but we've had a much more interesting journey, and I think it's much more vibrant and alive when you watch it this way. I'm never watching Doctor Who any other way now.
I've been fascinated by trying to remember how I felt the first time I've seen each of these episodes, most of which were at very different parts in my life. And it's been really interesting to sort of see how I feel about them today, which has been also kind of a surprising array of different emotions from between the episodes, and also like contrasts from when I watched them the first time. Yeah, this has been.
I'm discovering how little of Doctor Who I've actually seen, which is fascinating. It's like this is a whole new show to me in some ways.
I am still super excited for the first missing episode because I really haven't really done that. I haven't done missing episodes either in audio or what they did, the telesnaps or whatever. I know that stuff's available, but the availability of it occurred probably after when I was like really hardcore to Doctor Who, so I never really indulged, and I'm excited to indulge, to get into that. This one isn't that. This is a very widely available one. I've seen it before, but we'll get there eventually.
We will, and it's sort of, I mean, there's so much attendant media, right? I mean, and I find myself getting more into that. Like, I did not imagine I would ever read an entire Target novelization like I did last time for Mawdryn Undead. For this one, The Rescue, I've sort of dipped into the books that have been written around it. I briefly considered listening to a Big Finish adventure that's based on it. So like I'm getting more into it. The deeper that we get into our random journey into Doctor Who, it is definitely having an effect on me, and it's positive. It's increasing my love for the show tenfold. And my knowledge of the show tenfold, and all of the knowledge bombs that you are dropping, Pete, are definitely appreciated.
Yeah,
you really are the continuity king.
Well, this is why the podcast exists, is that I needed an outlet for all this semi-useless information that's been taking up half of my brain for the better part of the last 10, 30, 40 years. Yes, the Target novelizations, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, it's honestly like I probably have a much greater appreciation for them now, I think most Doctor Who fans do, than when they actually first came out in the 80s. Because, a lot of artwork was commissioned for Target novelizations. Writers were forced to sort of create backstories and interesting sort of mental episodes that aren't really written or mental bits that aren't really in the episodes themselves, that you can kind of sort of explore in its own kind of subgenre, which I think is just genius. It's just like, particularly like going on Twitter and seeing like the contests that numerous people sort of put out, and like which Target cover is better. There's so many good ones, and I got to say, for the episode we're about to see or about to talk about, there's been a lot of good artwork done since I think the art direction, the costumes are some of the best things about it. But I might be getting ahead of myself a little bit.
Indeed, but glad you brought up Twitter, because we did do another, or you did another live tweet.
I did.
Of this story, the rescue.
The rescue. That's where we're at, by the way, everyone.
Yes, yes. I'm sure it would be clear by the title of the show that you clicked on, or maybe you've just randomized your own podcasts and you're just listening to a random podcast, and here we are, a podcast about random things. So
I love that idea. The randomizer just keeps multiplying. It just keeps spreading its influence. Everything's random.
Just do everything randomly. Have you ever read the book The Dice Man?
I haven't.
That was a book from the 70s about a guy who like makes all his decisions based on rolling a dice. Like he just starts doing it, and then he gets really serious about it and gets into murder, and like it just, goes down a very dark path. That's not where we're going.
And then he invented Dungeons and Dragons. That sounds like the worst ripoff of Two-Face I could ever there's ever been. Instead of a coin, he rolls a dice.
Yeah,
man.
Face. 6 face. Or 20 face, depending on how.
So he only kills someone 1 out of 6 times.
But if he rolls a nat 20, you are so dead.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing left.
So how's the podcast been doing on TikTok, Pete?
The podcast has been thriving on TikTok. And thank you very much, TikTok audience, for continuing to just hang out with us there. Because I feel like we get a lot of good comments on the various snippets from the show. So what we do is we take minute-long or shorter snippets from the podcast, put them against some of the footage of the episode we're talking about, and it's a good little thought. It's a good little, bite-sized bit of pull to open for the audience, and we get a lot of comments on many of the videos. I get a lot of good observations, particularly the last one we did with Mawdryn Undead. We talked a lot about Turlough, how effective he was, and the Black Guardian. And there was some really cool response from that. Lots of people sort of had thoughts about the Black Guardian and Turlough, and what these things meant to them when they were watching it, and sort of some certain fan theories about it. And I thought, it lends itself to a whole other angle of discussion. So,
was anyone upset that we trashed the Black Guardian and the bird on his head?
No, I think everyone, no one could possibly defend that. But yeah, Valentine Dial, like I say, he was a traitor, and everyone is very on board with most of our praise of the show, and
the praise of the Brigadier, the double Brigadiers.
Well, the Randomizer loves the Brigadier. We like the Brigadier. I think we're going to run out of Brigadier episodes. I feel like we're going into a different direction. But again, I feel like there are eerie reasons the Randomizer has brought us here, which we'll get to.
Yes.
It's like this is one of the great things about doing Doctor Who completely in random order is you see the patterns you didn't see.
Yeah.
And the beats that get repeated that you don't quite catch the first time. That's been probably one of the most fascinating things about our journey here, and why I'm really excited to keep doing it.
Yeah, I have my own suggestions why the Randomizer better brought here, so I look forward to comparing those.
Nice.
But before we get there, we should do our regular segment, TLDW.
Indeed. So I
timed recap.
For some reason, I just realized it's me, and I honestly did not think about this before. We've been so focused on the socials and TikTok and the live tweeting that I forgot. Oh yeah, we do this, and it's my turn, right?
It is your turn, and luckily, I mean, it's the rescue, the 12th serial Doctor Who, and it is not the most, shall we say, complex story ever written. So it's I feel
it's the second
like
episode one. They had long. I mean, the Daleks was 6-part. There were most of the episodes, the longer ones were 6 parts. Most of them were 4 parts, and there were a couple of 2-parters. And this is a 2-parter.
Yeah,
it's a short one. Even by the time.
Which means that you have 1 minute to recap it. That's the only downside of this, because we said 30 seconds per classic episode. But I was sweating bullets over Mawdryn Undead last week. I realized how hard it is to encapsulate that entire plot with all its zipping around with 1977, with 1983, with the ship, with the school, the Black Guardian. Like, so much going on, but keeping it all straight had me worried for an entire week.
The problem is,
The
Chris,
Rescue
we're
is kind of the opposite.
storytellers. We're storytellers at heart as journalists. And we want to stop and key in on those moments that we really, really like. But then you suddenly realize you need way more than a minute just to describe this 1 5-minute sequence in the show. And then you just start zipping things together and sandwiching them. But somehow we get it done. That's the other thing about journalists. When you got a deadline, you hit it.
We're story condensers,
right?
We are trained to tell a story in a paragraph if that's the only space that we've got, right?
You're setting expectations higher for myself now. Okay? So I'm worried that people are like, oh man, this is gonna be great, man. He's gonna like tell great stories and he's gonna like do it in a minute and it's gonna be incredible. And
well, I'll say one more thing and then I'll let you get to it. But talking about how journalists condense things and we're trained to tell any story at any length. Kind of reminds me of the classic tale when I was at Time magazine of the guy who left on a Friday night thinking that he'd written the cover story, and then he gets a call on Saturday saying, "Oh, we're cutting it down to 2 pages." It's like, "Oh, okay, well, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's still 2 pages." He gets another call. We're cutting it down to a page. He finally opens the magazine on a Monday. It's a brief. It's 1 paragraph. It's been cut down from a cover story to 1 paragraph.
It's a page
but them's the
for
breaks.
Ants.
Them's the breaks. That's what happens. So in the space of the equivalent of 1 paragraph, which is 1 minute,
okay,
Peeper Shell, it's time to tell the story of the rescue. And I will...
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, we should also know we're doing this late on a Thursday instead of our normal weekend time, so I'm just going to throw that out there if this turns into a complete disaster, but let's see what happens.
All right, I'm going to find my timer. There it is. Always hard to find on the Apple Watch. And... All right, and go.
Okay, young woman gets on a planet. She's on a planet, stranded on a crash ship, gets a distress call, sees there's some ship that landed, and it turns out to be the TARDIS. And the TARDIS has just landed on this planet, and it's actually the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara. They've just come from Earth, the Dalek invasion. Susan's gone. Doctor misses her, so the Doctor stays in the TARDIS. Ian and Barbara go out. There's trouble. They encounter this weird bug-like guy who seems really sinister, and he seemingly throws Barbara off the cliff. Ian gets hurt, but the cave-in goes back to the Doctor. Oh my God! Barbara finds the young girl who's Vicki, who is helping her friend Bennett, who is actually he's injured, but he's actually been fooling everyone. He's actually the guy in the bug outfit who has been hurting everybody, and he actually says he killed everyone on the planet. So he ended up fooling everyone into thinking he was this bad guy, and he was going to get rescued by the rescue ship and make up this story. But Doctor and everyone screwed it up by getting there, and they confront him. He ends up getting killed by these 2 guys who he didn't get killed. Like, they were Didoians. They were people from the planet. And Vicki joins the TARDIS, and they go off. All right. Did you say?
That was over by about 30 seconds.
Dude, you got to tell me.
No, you were doing great. You were in a flow. I didn't want to interrupt it. You were getting there, and I felt like a steam train was picking up speed, and I didn't want to get out in front.
Well, I appreciate it. I feel terrible because I could feel it going over a minute, and I was like, damn it. Like, this is not...
Remember your previous outing, you did spend 20 seconds talking about Bill Potts' date. So
I'd like to wind it up. I like to set the scene. I like to ease people into it. I'm a storyteller, Chris. This is the thing.
It is the year 2463 or 93 or whatever.
93.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the spaceship UK 201.
Well, a lot happened, but I mean, the point is, it's man, I should have just said this is they left Susan. There's this woman, Vicki, who is basically a child. I mean, she's like 19 or something. And the doctor and everyone find their replacement.
Yeah, basically. It's your bog standard find a replacement companion episode. And also it's a story about gaslighting.
Indeed.
Which is maybe the first reason the randomizer has brought us here, not straight from The Lie of the Land, a story about gaslighting, but we were there 2 weeks ago. And of course the gaslighting is Bennett, who I wasn't 100% clear on it. Bennett killed someone on the ship on the way there, and then he had to kill a whole bunch of other people so that they didn't tell anyone. They wouldn't tell anyone, and then he had to commit genocide so that they wouldn't tell anyone.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty bad. So Bennett is evil, and he's a genocidal maniac. But yes, so he murders someone on the ship. I don't think it's ever specified who. We do know Vicki's father is on the ship, but the thing is, Vicki was sick, so she didn't see any of this when she was on the ship. So the fact that Bennett killed someone, everyone knew he was the murderer on the ship except Vicki because she was sick. So they crash on the planet. They go to seek help from the Dido people. The Dido people help them. They're super peaceful. Hey, let's hang out. Let's have a feast. But Bennett, I don't know. They never really specify what the movie. Like, it sounds like there's a whole movie that happens in terms of him murdering everyone. But basically, he somehow engineers it so that when they're all at the feast, he murders everyone else, which includes Vicki's dad and the Dido people, of which there are only 100.
So it's sort of like it's like the Pilgrim story, except if one person on the Mayflower had murdered everyone and then murdered all the Native Americans when they landed.
That's exactly it. You nailed it.
And kept one girl around and then just completely lied to her. By dressing up as a Native American and saying, "Hey, I'm the guy who killed all your friends. Therefore, you better not mess with me, and you better just stay on the ship."
Yeah, it's funny. Like, it's on top of murdering everyone, he decides to terrorize her and essentially traumatize her because he wants to keep her subservient and not asking questions. And it's just, wow, how many layers of evil do you want on this guy? It's pretty bad when you think about it.
I mean, apart from anything else, it's cultural appropriation. I mean, he's stolen their sacred costume, right? That he's wearing their ceremonial robes that the Doctor tells us at the end, they're only used in the halls of justice or something, like, it's a really super important ceremonial costume. And that he's using to scare Vicki with, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I got to say, like, let's just go right into it. This is probably the best thing about the whole episode is the costume and why it's in, like, all of the artwork for the show. Like, it is this really, really cool bug-like face, bug-like costume. The person who designed it, her name is Daphne Dare. I got to give her credit because it's one of the best costumes Doctor Who has ever done. Now, it's in black and white. But not only is the costume great, like, it has really good bug-like features, it has a lot of claws, it has a lot of spikes, it looks scary and alien all at once, but the way that it's used in this story is really cool. And I sort of botched this in the summary, but the fact that this bug-like guy named Coquillion is scaring them throughout the episode and you're kind of fascinated by it, I feel like it really subverts the whole Doctor Who expectation when he takes it off at the end and it's just a guy in a suit, because Doctor Who viewers at this point, and really throughout, have been trained to sort of look at the suit. They know it's a guy in a suit, right? Like, for the show, right? Like, and they're trained to, like, oh, wink and nod. Okay, we get it. Like, I could tell that's a guy in a suit, but I'm going with it because I like Doctor Who and they're selling it as this big alien thing. So as a viewer, you're like, oh, okay, this looks like a guy in a suit, but like it's supposed to be an alien. I get it.
Yeah.
And at the end, when it's just a guy in a suit, like it's just like, oh, you like you know what I mean? Like you're totally like
there are layers. There are layers to that.
Oh wow, you really like screwed with my expectations there. Like it's a cheesy B-movie suit for real.
Yeah, you thought it was, and it actually is, and that's how the Didoans wore it too. And here they are showing up at the end, the two of them that are still alive, to take care of business and throw them off a cliff, basically, which is how everyone dies on the planet Dido. Everyone falls off cliffs.
Yeah, there's a lot of cliff falling off. So, that's like bringing up the end. The two Dido guys, the Dido people, Didoians. I'm not sure what the right word is, but they come out. Who did you think they were? Were they survivors in hiding? Were they ghosts? What were they supposed to be exactly? It's never really explained. What was your thought?
It is never explained, and it is super weird because they're both sort of weird blonde Aryan types. And you're like, they look pretty healthy, and it's like, wait, where have they been hiding themselves? Why are they still alive? And they don't say anything. Like the doctor barely even sees them. He doesn't speak to them because the doctor's been knocked out by Bennett / Coquillian. Which, by the way, he'd also appropriated the name. I didn't realize this until I wrote it up online. Like that was a name, or Kakulian or something like that was the name they used in their ceremonies. So he anglicized it, I guess, to Coquillian.
Oh, interesting. Coquillian. Was that was in the novelization, or?
Yeah, I think that might have been novelization. I'm not sure. I've read a lot of stuff about the rescue. More has been written than was in the actual script itself. It's fascinating for that reason.
You do your research.
Seems to have stuck in a lot of people's minds. But yeah, it's not clear. It's not clear. A lot of things about Dido aren't clear. First of all, the Doctor has visited there already,
which I think is a first for the series. I think this is the first time the Doctor says, "Oh, I've been here before." Aside from Earth, of course, but he alludes to basically an off-screen adventure that he had before the series itself. Really, like we have been on Dido before. Yeah, very interesting.
Oh yeah, I recognize Dido, and apparently there were. I think he says 100 people or hundreds of people, which is not really a thriving population any way you slice it. So it's gone from 100 to 2. They both appear to be male. I'm not going to make any presumptions about how Dido people replicate, but maybe it's asexual. I don't know. Maybe it's two guys. I don't know. I don't want to judge, but I don't really think their species is going to last much longer if it's just the two of them left. So there's some real sort of, genocidal ethical issues going on here.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I got to say, I got to step back even further. 100 people, really? Like, that's it?
Yeah.
Like one dude is able to blow your whole species up. I mean, that's a little all your eggs in one basket to begin with. And not that it justifies anything, but it's like... it doesn't sound like a thriving people to begin with, but this is Doctor Who, right? I mean, like they do these sort of iconic things that simplify the story, don't really make a lot of sense, but you kind of go with it, and they still kind of work.
It still has to, leap that level of, understanding in your brain, right? You've got to be able to go along with it. Got to give us the tools to go along with it. But here's something else interesting. If the Doctor has visited Dido before, then presumably he did so with Susan, because presumably he's been traveling with Susan since he left Gallifrey. Which, by the way, in the novel Byzantium, which is a sequel to The Rescue, the Doctor's said to be 296 years old and to have left Gallifrey 60 years ago. So that's how long he's supposed to be traveling at this point. So it would have been at some point at that point. So he and Susan have been zipping around the universe for 60 years. And we know that he's like, we have the scene in the TARDIS where he accidentally tells Susan to do something and then realizes she's not there, which is heart-wrenching, by the way.
Totally.
So that would mean that when he went to Dido before, he went with Susan, so the whole planet would be reminding him of her. So if that were I feel like the writers missed a trick there. If that were the case, that we could have a lot of heartstring tugging going on here. Like the Doctor could be like, oh, this cave, or this Hall of Justice, or whatever. You know, I was here with Susan. You know.
Yeah. Especially since it's like such a small population, presumably all the same places and all the same things they were doing. Yeah, if it was a longer episode, they might have had time for that, or if they thought of it. I got to say, I don't know if this particular story could have been much longer. There's actually a lot going on in the second episode, at least it seems to be for a bit, but I wouldn't endorse having it go even to another episode or two, just because I think the resolution's pretty obvious. The twist is a bit obvious, maybe less so for 1960s audiences, but I feel like they stretched the story as much as they could here. And
unless you had like
flashbacks
to the murders on the ship, like that would be one way
right.
to extend it. But yeah, it's pretty much a vehicle for the arrival of Vicki. Although not as much as everyone thinks. Apparently, the writer did originally have the idea of a story involving a murder on a spacecraft, and you know the murderer trying to cover it up
and doing kind of a whodunit.
Yeah. So, you know, it was theoretically supposed to go straight from Dalek invasion of Earth to the Romans, and when they just threw this in, I guess. David Whittaker was the writer, and he just said,
right.
"Yeah, I got this idea. I can squeeze that in here." But what do you think about the fact that we see right there at the end of the episode that the Doctor inviting Vicki into the TARDIS, and this is the first time. It's not only the first time we've ever seen a companion be invited to travel with the Doctor. It's also the only time, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it happens in the Hartnell era.
That's a good, actually, come to think of it. There are rivals.
I just accidentally stroll in. That also happens with Dido.
Stephen wanders in.
Yep. Everyone used to just wander into the TARDIS.
And so did Ben and Polly. I can't speak to Dodo because...
Dodo, I think... I looked this up to see if I was accurate about this being the only Hartnell era invitation. Yeah, I think Dodo also mistook it for a police box.
And that's kind of it, right? Who else is there?
Katerina.
Well, yeah, you're right. It's her kingdom. So that's all Dalek Master Plan stuff.
Yeah, but we don't really... I think they're all missing episodes, right? So we don't...
Well, it's also like, I'm not sure... They're all sort of within the same story, so it's a little bit like I've traveled in the TARDIS, so does that count as a companion? A little bit like Adam Mitchell later.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like in terms of like the proper companions who were there for a while, no one's really invited except for Vicki.
Yeah, so
it's good.
Did it seem out of character to you for the irascible?
No, not at all. I honestly, mostly because it's like the Susan, the missing Susan wanting someone to sort of be her surrogate is so powerful in this and so obvious that it just seems like, of course you're going to invite her to go along with you. Otherwise,
I guess a more honest invitation would be, "Hey, I just lost my granddaughter. I just left her on Earth, locked her out of the TARDIS in a super traumatic way. Took her shoe. I actually went back to watch the end of the Dalek Invasion of Earth to see, because I'd never seen it, to see how exactly. I'd seen the speech that he gives to Susan from the safety of the TARDIS, which they repeat in the Five Doctors, right? That's kind of a famous speech.
Right.
But I hadn't seen how he did it, and he steals her shoe.
Well, he's got to lock the door. You can't just I'm going to open it up. I'm going to give you your shoe. You can't come in. I don't think that would. I don't think that would work.
tossed a shoe out as as he locks the door. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think all the stuff with Vicki and the Doctor in the second episode kind of sets the stage for this. So there is some really good dialogue between the Doctor and Vicki in episode 2, where she's sort of angry at Barbara. I mean, the script is actually quite good because there are good moments of genuine anger between and good emotional moments. So when Barbara kills Sandy, the pet, and Vicky's very angry with her, understandably so. If anyone's had a pet die on them, and particularly if someone who is in a very isolated place has gone through trauma and has attached to a pet, honestly, I would think Vicky would be even more attached to this animal than
that is certainly how you
on.
could string it out. It could be like this Misery style situation where, you know, Barbara ends up tied to a bed.
A dark rescue. But I feel like what that serves is that Vicky is vulnerable, she's angry, and the Doctor has his opportunity to come in, and if he essentially if he plays his cards right, but if he actually is a compassionate grandfather figure for this young woman, the bond will be that much stronger. And I think to his credit, Bill Hartnell sells it really well. The dialogue's actually quite good on David Whittaker's part, and he really just goes full grandfather on her, you know, and he's very much like, okay, you know, I know you're angry, but you know, Barbara was really just trying to protect you, and he wins her over very quickly. And right then, you kind of start seeing a bond forming. And so it doesn't come out of nowhere at the end when he's like, you know, I want you, you know, you could come with me. And I really liked, and this is really just a thing only that's sort of hindsight's 2020, but the exact dialogue that he uses to convince her echoes some promos for season 5 with Matt Smith, series 5 in 2010. It's probably a conscious thing. They might have looked at the rescue. I don't know, maybe, or at least it was in their minds. But he goes like, he says, anywhere and everywhere, regardless of space and time. Like, that's what I'm offering you. And you know, that's a hell of a pitch.
Yep.
And he's made something similar to various companions, but like I say, the exact wording I remember distinctly because it's actually my favorite promo of Doctor Who ever. Is that series 5 promo with Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, where he says, you know, anywhere and everywhere, any star that ever was, you know, where do you want to start? Yeah.
Except the Hartnell Doctor doesn't ask you where you want to start.
No, he has
First
no
of
idea.
all, I'm not sure he knows where he's going. He basically has a randomizer on his TARDIS.
Yeah.
And secondly, no, you don't get a say. You know, he's very paternalistic.
Yeah.
Is the Hartnell Doctor. And you definitely see that when you're contrasting him as we just did with, say, Peter Davison.
Yeah. He does he marches to the beat of his own drum. He does his own thing. It's funny, like they never specify that everything's so vague in the first Doctor's era. And there's even I think a little bit of vague dialogue in this one where we just had so little we know so little about the Doctor at this point. You know, he's the Doctor's from a different age, a different planet altogether. Like that's something how Barbara describes him at one point. And it's I just love like thinking about that era, even though we know so much now, obviously, about who the Doctor is, where he's from, but you think about like what this was like in season 2 of this show. Like you had no idea, like why who is this guy? Why does this thing look like a police box? I mean, we kind of know, but not really. Like,
why does he dress like an Edwardian time traveler?
Right.
And the different age thing is interesting because I think they say it twice, or they emphasize it. Like it's the different age before the different planet. The more important thing seems to be that he's from somewhere else in time rather than somewhere else in space, and that's what they seem to be teasing. But also, it emphasizes the fact that Ian and Barbara just don't know.
Yeah.
And they've not asked. I don't know if they're in sort of a Stockholm syndrome situation at this stage, but they're just sort of like, yeah, we've been captured by this random wild dude with white hair, and he's taking us around, hasn't told us anything about him, but you should totally trust him.
Yeah.
Completely trustworthy grandfather figure.
You gotta like think about the era. Like I get it. When you put it that way, it makes no sense, and it probably shouldn't make sense. And most people, if people whisk you away somewhere, you should probably ask who they are, where they're from.
Yes, remember, kids, do not go off with strange white-haired men in police boxes.
I might be reading too much into this, but if you think about the '60s and just generally, like there's a bit of a religious quality to it. Of like, this person has, in a sense, saved me. Not necessarily saved, but like has opened the world, the universe in a way to me that I've never seen before. Bestowed me with knowledge and adventure that I heretofore like I would never have conceived of, and that has, I think, awed them to a point where they're putting enough faith in him. Like it's okay, you know. Like the wonders you've shown me, I could die easily, but I'm still okay, and I'm here with you, so I'm going to trust you.
It's On the Road. It's basically the plot of On the Road. They're beatniks, you know. The Doctor is like the Neil Cassidy character. He's just they're getting loose. They're living wild and free on the roads of time and space.
Exactly.
Everyone was getting into this in the mid '60s, right? Everyone was reading Kerouac, so they should have really hyped that up. Had him regenerate into a beatnik. Which he kind of did.
Yeah, there were moments. Beatnik Planet.
But yeah, it's fascinating, and I want to talk a little bit about, speaking of the time and place that this was in, about my part of England, the north of England.
Okay.
And its particular relationship to this episode, because Maureen O'Brien plays Vicki. Mm-hmm. She was completely unknown to television.
Yeah, first role. I think.
Yeah, she was an actress from Liverpool, which is the town I was born in.
Nice. Did you guys hang out?
Yeah. Well, I should ask my dad, because he grew up in Liverpool, and Vicki appears to be just 2 years older than he was. Ooh. So maybe they rubbed shoulders. I don't know. I mean, my dad's the guy who went to the Cavern but never saw the Beatles, right?
Oh no,
they went to the wrong school. We never stop reminding him of this fact. He went to see another band that nobody's ever heard of because he thought they were going to hit it. Yeah. So
Mr. Taylor.
1965. Liverpool's cool. We've got an actress from Liverpool in the TARDIS, even if she doesn't have the accent. But also, very fascinating thing about this episode is its viewing figures. It got more viewers than the Dalek invasion of Earth.
Than any Dalek episode.
Than any Dalek episode. It had like 13 million viewers, but particularly those viewers were from the north. It was the number one show of the week. It was like the number 8 show of the week overall in the UK as a whole. But in the north, it was number one. In London, it was number one. And in the north, it was number one. Like they combined forces, and that's huge. I don't think Doctor Who has ever hit the number one spot like overall, but yeah, it was a big thing that was watched in the north, and this ties in to a show that I recently started rewatching called The Likely Lads, which you probably haven't heard of over this side of the pond, but it was sort of the first northern English sitcom. And in episode 1, there's a Doctor Who mention. And episode 1 was broadcast in December 1964, which is the month before the rescue. And there's a line about so the plot is, so it's Bob and I forget what the other guy is, but they're two likely lads. They're two, today it would be men behaving badly. They're on the pole, and they've got some French girls that they're bringing back to the house. And Bob's sister says, "Oh, you'll not get our dad in here. Like, you'll not get our dad to participate in a family dinner. He'll miss his Doctor Who." And I thought so much about that line when I saw it. So I'm like, it's sort of weird because we think of Doctor Who as evolving as a children's show first,
Mm-hmm.
but it really was. It was super popular with adults.
Right.
Like my dad was, I think, 16 when Doctor Who started, and he was watching. He thinks of it now as a show from his childhood. It wasn't. It was from his later teenage years. He was basically an adult. He got into it. You know, all these northern men getting into it when they got home from the football match. So that was exactly when it was broadcast, and Doctor Who would be the thing that was on, and to the point where it was a punchline in sitcoms, just a year after it started. It's just fascinating to me that it had that rabid following, and here we have northern representation in the show for the first time, and I'm sure that miniskirt Vicki was wearing didn't hurt.
Right.
My goodness,
I have never heard that theory about the
Yeah.
northern connection, and it makes a certain amount of sense. The idea that a whole generation of Northerners were raised on Doctor Who and then sort of went on to, make it and do other things. I like that idea.
Yeah, Doctor Who and the Beatles, man. They're both all the rage in the mid-60s.
Well, this is about 10 episodes away, maybe or so, from The Chase, where the Beatles actually make their one and only Doctor Who appearance. I believe it's stock footage from the BBC, but from one of their appearances there. But I distinctly remember that. That made an impression on me, seeing it as a kid on PBS and sort of cementing the Beatles and the Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And British culture all in one. It was kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. This is all kind of the same era.
And Susan looked very Beatles-esque.
Indeed.
Right? With her haircut, she definitely looked like a Beatles fan.
Well, that was an interesting thing about Maureen O'Brien getting cast as Vicki. So apparently they asked her at one point to dye her hair, which is such an ex-boyfriend thing to do, like, could you wear this scent? Could you dye your hair? And I am really impressed with the story. I assume it's true that being a brand new person to the industry, you wouldn't think she'd have the self-confidence or the be able to stand up for herself, but maybe because of that she was able to do it, because she basically was like, why don't you just recast the person who just left? Like, why don't you just go get her? Like, if you want someone, you want a brunette, get a brunette, but I'm not going to dye my hair. And I'm just like, good for her.
Yeah. I mean, these days, a showrunner might still say, we'd like you to dye your hair, but you wouldn't say, I want you to look like an exact clone of the person who used to be on the show. Like, I think there's an understanding now that contrast is good. Diversity is good, and maybe the audience is ready for a blonde. the first blonde in Doctor Who,
right?
which she is.
Exact. Yeah, it's true.
Be exclusively brunettes up until then, and white haired. But yeah, it's super weird, and it was supposed to be the woman who's in at the end of the Dalek invasion of Earth. She was supposed to be the new companion.
I would remember. I haven't. I didn't research that one like you did in going into this one, so I can't remember. But I do remember various people in that episode. Anyone could have been possibly the companion, but I guess they were planning on that. And then there was a weird. I forget the reasons why they didn't do it, but I do know there was.
Well, I think they just saw her in action. They were like, she's not right for the role. She's not fighting the Daleks hard enough. I don't know. Doesn't have enough spunk.
Yes, we'll call you, hon. No, we'll call you. Don't worry. It's all right. You go home now. But they had this. And this isn't that notable, but the rescue is the first episode in the new production block of Doctor Who. So basically, they were essentially making every episode back to back for weeks.
52 weeks.
Isn't that insane? And they did this for years. Like they literally shot the show every week, like throughout the week, from September to July. And like, I guess the cast had about like roughly a month off, before they had to start coming back and doing things like,
Yeah.
whoa.
I mean, no wonder they start off with Bill Hartnell in his chair asleep in the TARDIS. No wonder is it like an Eames chair he's sitting in at the start? He's got this,
It's very comfy.
it's very comfy 50s style chair
Mm.
that he's falling asleep in. I would totally fall asleep, especially the rhythm of the TARDIS. Like, if it's humming and vibrating when it's in motion, like you totally fall asleep to that.
I gotta say, and we'll probably come back to this a few times. I think Bill Hartnell's rapport with William Russell and Jacqueline Hill is so good. Like I feel, there's lines that are kind of not that funny, but they come across like, I mean, the warmth and the back and forth between them is just really great to see. Like there's the bit where it's, Doctor, the trembling stopped. Oh my dear, I'm so glad you're feeling better. Like the way it's done, it's actually really funny, and it's not the funniest line as a line, but it's just like the dynamic between them is just so inviting and warm. You're just like, oh, this is great. I love hanging out in here.
Yeah. Well, William Hartnell had a history of comedy roles, just like John Pertwee, and Trout. When you look back at it, like Peter Davison was almost the first serious Doctor. They all kind of had this
True
comedy aspect to them before that. Well, maybe I guess you could say Tom Baker, since he hadn't really done any comedy roles, but he's just a natural comedian type anyway.
Yeah, well, everyone thought his presence was so comedic that I know, like Peter Davison has said in many interviews, like, well, let's dial back the laughs. We're gonna do serious, but yeah, like it's true. It took until the Fifth Doctor to really get serious about it.
Yeah. And Hartnell is sort of the way that he's moves through the caves. By the way, I think that there's a line about how they don't have a good time in caves, which is great. Caves are kind of the gravel pits of the 1960s.
Right. Quarries
Doctor
are the
Who.
new caves for 70s Doctor Who.
Yeah, exactly. So they make reference to that, which is nice. But also, as he's sort of bumbling about the cave, you definitely get the sense that, like, this is a man who's acted on stage a lot. This is a man who's done a lot of vaudeville. He has that sort of exaggerated movement, exaggerated bumbling. That, oh dear, let me pat my forehead. Like he has that, and it really works for him.
Yeah,
I love it. It's wonderfully nostalgic to see now.
So, like I said, I mentioned it earlier, but I think one of the scenes that really works is the bit where Barbara kills the pet.
Yes,
And,
Sandy.
Yeah, because I also think it's very unexpected from almost like a moralistic standpoint. If you sort of get my point, like, I mean, Barbara comes out, she assumes this thing is a killer because looks mean.
Mm-hmm.
She kills it. There's no happy ending for this pet, like it's dead.
Yeah.
And Vicki is sort of rightly mad at her, even though she tried to do the right thing. But I like how it sort of shows how the Doctor and his companions are fallible and how they make mistakes, and sometimes they make things worse where they go. And, it's one of those things that I don't think you quite get enough. I mean, I think Doctor Who's always had that to some extent, but I think the better episodes work with it really well. And we see it here in its almost form. It's very early form. And this is the first time it happened. I mean, I think there's other episodes that show it. I think the Aztecs is a great example of that. But here, like, I really liked this sort of 60s era sort of morality and sort of the complexity of it. And like that our heroes are here to learn as well. They're not here just to like come in and save things. And I thought it was very nice to see that and see it sort of in its early form.
Agreed, and it would have been nice to see some consequences from that. To see Barbara maybe, I guess she's a little upset that she's killed the pet, but like it doesn't. Yeah, it's just sort of forgotten about.
Yeah,
there's no compensation of it. I guess you got to ride in the TARDIS.
Yeah, it's too bad.
So much of this is like a period piece as well. It's the other thing I like about when you see the old technology, like the radar and the communication with the rescue ship that they're having at the start.
The tape recorder.
Yeah, and the tape recorders. So, Bennett manages to get away with this double act as Bennett and Quillian by having a bunch of tape recorders set up that say things like, "No, go away. No, you can't come in. Stay out."
Honestly,
No.
I don't quite, even with technology of 2021, I'm not quite sure how I'd set that up in my bedroom. Like how would I get something like Alexa to sort of respond in that way if someone were to knock on my door? That'd be a tough one.
Isn't this the plot of Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Right?
Like, he has a tape recorder set up, but what Bennett forgot to do was to have the figure in bed built out of balloons, who tries to get up when the door opens. Like, that's what he really should have rigged up.
100%. And then there's like the trap door that the doctor finds, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go out the trap door." And he somehow ends up in the cave, which I guess, okay, whatever. But if you think about it for 2 seconds, like, how does the trap door from the ship go into the cave? But then if you're like, oh, okay, well, it just goes out of the ship, which is fine, and the doctor walks to the cave. But if that's the case, like, why doesn't he tell everybody? He's like, you just go back in, guys. There's a trap door. Bennett's not here. Come on, let's go to the cave. He just goes on his own, and it's like, okay, I guess.
And who built that tunnel? Did Bennett, like, with a spoon kind of just, is this like the Great Escape? He's been working on that tunnel for months.
Well, they never explicitly say how long they've been there.
Yeah.
And so if you could permit me a bit of a indulgence of like what this movie might have looked like. Kills everybody. Vicky's sick for a while, like maybe weeks. He's kind of in a coma, and he sort of feeds it. I guess you'd have to sort of wonder like why he's continuing to keep her alive. But maybe you could say like the Didoians have already found him, and them, like he hasn't had his chance yet to come out. But then how does he tunnel it? Yeah, you're right. So, well, maybe it's a little bit. You got a little Shawshank here. So he's tunneling it, unbeknownst to the people who are keeping him there, as well as the Didoians. He's still waiting for his chance, and then it comes when everyone's at the feast because the guards there aren't as many guards. He's got the tunnel built. Vicky's still sick, kills everybody, and I guess he thinks the tunnel he needs to use at some point. Why would he build the tunnel in the first place? This doesn't work at all. Never mind.
Well, the interesting thing about Bennett is that he was almost played by Bernard Archard, who we've seen.
Scarman. Mr. Scarman.
Yeah, Marcus Scarman from Pyramids of Mars. So maybe the randomizer knows this. Maybe that's why the randomizer has brought us here.
Could be.
There's also the Ian Chesterton connection with Mawdryn Undead. Is that was supposed to be an Ian Chesterton story.
True. Here's my theory on the randomizer. We saw the Doctor in Mawdryn Undead invite Turlough into the TARDIS, ostensibly because he really feels a bit traumatized and he really misses the companion that is now gone, which was Adric at the time. And now I feel like the connection here is that he's inviting Vicki on board because he's clearly suffering from missing Susan. And that's the main, that's I think the big randomizer connection that we're seeing.
Yeah, we've gone from the weirdest new companion story to the original new companion story.
Right. Arguably the safest new companion story.
Yeah, there's nothing that could possibly be amiss about Vicki. She's such an innocent.
Yeah, you can't help but like her. I mean, I don't think she's interesting at this point. I'm not sure if she ever gets interesting, and I think that's a little bit revealed by the fact that Vicki actually never gets a last name, at least on screen. She's just Vicki.
Yep, and she ends up, just spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it. She ends up in, is it the Myth Makers? She ends up going to Troy.
Yes.
And like that's where she lives out her days.
That's where she ends up.
So that's an interesting arc. You would definitely do a lot more with these days.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Vicki was good. I mean, I remember enjoying the chase. I remember enjoying the Romans. She does some fun things. She's enthusiastic. She's young. She does what she needs to do, which is that she's an effective replacement for Caroline Ford and Susan. It misses the
Which is
backstory of the grandfather granddaughter thing.
Yeah,
But maybe
so
that's
that's what I
better
was going
in
to
some
ask you
ways.
about. It's like, yeah, it is better because it avoids those weird questions. But on the other hand, so Caroline Ford leaves because she feels her character isn't getting developed enough.
Mhm.
And instead of, these days you might say, the showrunner might say, oh, well, we'll develop your character then. That's a good note. We'll fill in your backstory some more. We'll talk about this weird grandfather-granddaughter thing. If she'd stayed, maybe we would know more after all these years about how the hell the Doctor has a granddaughter, who the intervening generation is, how the whole thing worked. And just because she left so early, because she leaves 10, 11 stories in, we don't, that whole storyline is suddenly cut short, and we just don't know. So yeah, while it's great to have Vicki along, I think she has a certain pizzazz and energy to her that, Caroline Ford was a bit more waif-like. She was kind of a, little manic pixie dream girl.
She had a few more broken ankles throughout. Yeah, no, I take your point. Like in that, it's hard to sort of think about an alternate universe where she stayed, but let's think about it for a minute. Because the current one, I think you get a longer mystery, and you don't have a lot when Troughton takes over, and it takes until the end of the Troughton era to get to the Time Lords.
Yeah.
And maybe there would have been a bit more there. Like, if think about like the one episode that would have really been interesting to see if Susan was still there is the Time Meddler.
Yeah.
And if you get not just the Doctor's reaction, but also Susan's of like who this guy is, and you get other companions, I guess would be Stephen at that point, asking Susan questions they might not be comfortable asking the Doctor, like who the hell is this guy? Where are you guys from? Like these natural questions that arise from like, wait a minute, you both have TARDISes? Like what?
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah. And it sort of, so it's been retconned in later media to suggest that the Doctor left Susan on Earth at the end of the Dalek invasion, because then the Time Lords wouldn't find her there. Like that's the last place they'd go looking for her. But yeah, it would be nice to have dug into that a little bit more. But, Vicky's great. What can I say?
Do you want to examine the thing we like to examine, which is what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Yeah, so I guess they would have all have fallen off cliffs.
Barbara falls off a cliff right away, which I was
Yeah.
like a little bit like I know I've seen the episode before, but I was like, whoa! I kind of like it was still like, holy crap! Like you just threw her
And
off a
by
cliff.
the way, not to divert us too much from what if the evil plot had succeeded, but the TARDIS at the very end falls off a cliff. Like that's the beginning of the Romans. And again, spoiler alert, I had to watch the beginning of the Romans just to find out what happens next. They don't explain what happens next. They just cut to, several months later, they're in a villa eating grapes.
Yeah, I mean it's all
There is
seemingly
no
a setup.
resolution.
It's all seemingly a setup just for that visual gag of like Ian lying there thinking like, oh, is he okay? Oh wait, he's just eating grapes.
Yeah. Yes. So there's it's a cliffhanger with no resolution, which is so disappointing. But also, I thought that the TARDIS was supposed to not ever land anywhere that was, would be like on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
I thought the TARDIS knew what it was about.
What system is that? Is that the coordinate override or the HADS? It's not the HADS because it's not hostile action. It isn't the first time. I mean, it is the first time. Sorry, this is what I believe. This is the first time the TARDIS lands on a cliff. It is not the last time the TARDIS lands on a cliff or falls off a cliff. So, if you the Curse of Paladin is another one where it falls, and the Impossible Planet. Both of those, and those aren't quite the same. It's not teetering at the start, but it ends up falling down a long chasm. And there's probably a couple others I'm not really thinking of right now.
The TARDIS, not as safe as advertised.
Not as safe as advertised, although it is apparently indestructible. I've been told a few times, although that's also been proven wrong on other times. So anyway,
I mean, it did blow up and destroy the universe, but that's a whole other story. All right, so if the evil plot had succeeded, well, the evil plot is Bennett trying to gaslight Vicki.
Kill everybody, right? It's pretty straightforward, I think.
I guess he would. So here's something interesting, that apparently in the early versions of the script, it was made more explicit that he had, for want of a better term, icky designs on Vicki.
Oh man!
And they managed to avoid any representation of this on the screen, right? Rather skillfully. Like you're not even paying attention to the fact that this is an older man, kind of gaslighting a young lady for unclear purposes. So if the evil plot had succeeded, we would have had to have seen more about what that was actually about.
Okay.
Presumably, he was actually okay with the rescue ship landing, right? Because this was his whole plot, was to get Vicki to say she didn't know what had happened to anyone. She's not a witness, right?
Well,
so then,
I mean, at what point does he start killing people, right? Because it's like presumably, if he gets the job done with Barbara, maybe she dies instead of finds Vicki. Because if Barbara finds Vicki, then the jig is up, because he's going to have to kill Barbara. Or kill everyone else and get Barbara and Vicki to both be gaslit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I could see that option. Barbara, overcome with grief for having killed Sandy, the sand creature, accedes to telling the rescue crew whatever Bennett tells them. Yeah, it is not entirely clear, but it's also clear that if it had, other than killing the Doctor or driving the Doctor away in some way, shape, or form, that's the only effect of the evil plot succeeding that we would have cared about.
Right. So it kills the Doctor in the end.
Any major impact?
Maybe gaslights Barbara. Maybe kills her too. But do the Dido people come regardless?
That is a good question.
Because they're there.
They've been waiting all along.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were on their way to a planet called Astra, I think, the ship when it left Earth.
At least
Vicki
Vicki
presumably
was.
the rescue ship.
It might have been an Uber pool. We don't know. If it's an Uber pool, they might have, Astra was the first stop or the third stop, and everyone else got us somewhere else.
Just like with Uber, that scene at the start where Vicki thinks the rescue ship is closer than it is. Because she sees the bleeping on the screen. Mm-hmm. It's such an Uber trick.
Totally. Like, oh my God, it's so an Uber trick. It's like, here's the car. Where's the car? And it's like, oh, actually, it's 6 blocks away all of a sudden. Oh, right. All right, well, great. And that guy, okay, I gotta just a quick thing. That guy on the other side of the radio, he's a jerk. Like, she's like, this woman is like clearly distraught talking to you.
Yeah.
And needs some reassurance. And he's like, look, I can't talk to you right now. And we're not going to talk to you until we get closer. So shut up and stop talking to me. Like, that's basically what he says. It's like, what? What are you doing? Why don't you have a person permanentally on station to talk to this woman and whoever else is stranded? Because it's like, damn.
This is definitely a Doctor Who story over which the shadow of World War II is hanging, I think, as it did over most of Britain, through the early 60s, right? Still very sort of a very regimented society.
Right.
Right. And militarized in a very sort of everyday way. So, that was what that read to me. And the way that Bennett sort of orders Vicki around, had that feel to it as well. Like it's just an age where older white men ordered a lot of people around, and you can see the results of that.
Indeed. Well,
in the year
luckily,
2493.
the elder white man who was dressing up as a bug, his evil plot did not succeed, and we got to see more of Doctor Who for another 50 plus years. Okay. Yeah. So this one's pretty good. I generally like it. I think the bar's fairly low for the rescue. It has to do a few things.
Yeah.
The whodunit's pretty effective. I think, as it gets a little more obvious as it goes on, but it's kind of hard to say because I think it really works for the audience at the time.
Yeah.
Mostly because of the costume thing I mentioned earlier. Like it's so subversive. It's like even if you're predicting it, I think you appreciate, oh, it's just a guy in a suit. Oh, crazy. Like I think there's a certain delight with that. I think it works. I think the performances all work. I think the bits of moralism, it's short, the bar's low, but it really works. I'm giving this one in our rating system, which rates good episodes as Daleks and bad episodes as Ogrons, in case it hasn't been clear until now. In my book, this one's a Dalek. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's a miniature Dalek. It's not a bad way to spend an hour.
It's maybe one of those revelation of the Daleks, which are kind of like human Daleks, a little bit nasal and don't quite. They kind of wander around a little bit and bump into things, but they're Daleks. They're okay. I appreciate seeing
it's a
Daleks.
Dalek eye stalk sticking out of someone's forehead. That's what I'm rating it.
Oh yeah. Oh man, those like zombie guys. No, it's better than that. It's better than that. The zombie Daleks. I'm not a fan of the zombie Daleks. The Moffat era zombie Daleks. Dalek zombies? I guess they're not really zombie Daleks. Okay.
Yeah.
But we digress.
Yeah, I'm gonna. There's also just such the nostalgia element of it being a very, very of its era.
Mm-hmm.
The Union Jack being on the ship.
Right.
Back in the days when we thought Britain was going to go to space on its own.
Mm.
And just stuff like the fact that Ian still wears a tie.
Ian still wears a tie. I think that is hilarious. It's so struck out to me. Like he's adventuring in this 2-piece suit and a tie that is buttoned all the way up.
Yes.
Like okay, admittedly, David Tennant, yes, he adventures in a suit too. Somehow it works, but at least he unbuttoned his shirt. At least he could move. Like,
just give your neck a little room. Like there's that whole scene which we haven't discussed, the cliffhanger at the end of the first episode, the spikes that come out of the cliff.
Yeah,
that Ian is perfectly capable of walking around these spikes.
Yeah, and I'm certain people even at the time thought so. Like, what's the threat here? What? And also, like, the spikes only go out to the cliff edge, and it's like he kind of goes around them, and it's like, well, if those spikes had just gone out like another couple of feet, and then this is never really mentioned. Is there really a threat considering that the creature's a vegetarian? Like
yes,
it roars.
So
okay, but
that is the same creature. Okay, I wasn't entirely clear on that, but yeah, it's sort of. I do like that. Even through all of that, he still, he's perfectly dapper in his suit, and it kind of reminds me of a tweet I saw this week of. It was a picture of Indiana Jones with a bare chest, sort of, hacking away with a machete, attacking, punching Nazis or whatever. And the caption of the tweet was, when you're a tenured archaeology professor in Connecticut. I'm like, yeah, okay. Indiana Jones probably, it would have been more authentic to its era for him to still wear his suit on his actual adventures. Yeah. Right. I think that's what the rescue is teaching us.
Exactly. As long, and considering what he did with his hat, it would be the same suit in every single movie. Which it kind of was with the leather jacket.
Yeah.
Just a different
kind of tie caught on a spike. He'd run back to get it. Just you have a lot of scenes like that. Good times.
All right. So should we find out where we're going next? Should we pull out our randomizer?
Very excited about this.
So this is it, guys.
So while I'm doing this, do you want to explain to the people at home?
Absolutely.
How we randomize?
Every week we find out where we're going next. We activate the TARDIS randomizer, which is a is it random.org? Is that what it is? So random.org bases its random numbers on atmospheric radiation, atmospheric movements.
Yeah, noise.
So because, as it turns out, computers are actually notoriously bad at picking random numbers. They really aren't good at it. Computers are very logical. They need to sort of figure out some way to do a random number, and that is just a thing that doesn't jive with true randomness. So this is a much better way to find a random number. So you just go to random.org, uses atmospheric radiation to figure out what random number you want between any two numbers you want. And we have every Doctor Who story that has been broadcast on television in a single spreadsheet. There have been 297 of them, and we have them in a spreadsheet between rows 2 and 298. It's just how Google Sheets works, guys. You know how it works. And we are going to pick one now. We're going to pick one of these random numbers, and that is the next episode we're going to check out. So what is it going to be, Chris? Let's do it.
Okay.
Activate.
Ready? Generate.
Fantastic.
8.
8? Are you kidding? It's the Sensorites.
Wow.
8? Did you really do the 298?
Yes. I can send you a screenshot.
My goodness, we're doing the Sensorites. We've gone back in time 4 stories.
I think the randomizer likes William Hartnell.
I think it's definitely gotten a taste of him and is going for it. Okay, the Sensorites. Okay. Fun fact, the Sensorites as a kid was the story I fell asleep the most in front of.
That's a very precise distinction. How did you...
I remember this because they were broadcasting them on PBS. They'd gone through, so they did. I started with Davison. When they finished the end of Davison, they started at Pertwee. They did Pertwee all the way back to Davison and did Colin Baker, then back all the way to Hartnell, and then Hartnell. I did everything, and I was so into every episode except for the Sensorites, and I videotaped every episode so I could watch it again. And every time I went back to the Sensorites, I would just fall asleep.
Wow.
And yeah, it was just one of those things. I don't know why.
Well, hopefully this is not going to have that same effect this time.
I'll power through it, I guess. I mean, I'll sit down with some strong tea or some Starbucks lattes and just, okay, I'm getting through this. This is it. It's for the pod.
I like that you originally watched the Doctors in random order. That seems so perfect for the journey that we're on now.
Yeah, they would rewind to random eras, but when they went back to Hartnell, they went all the way. They went with every possible story all the way up to McCoy, and
wow,
everything that was available then.
I'm very excited. Sensorites, yet another one I don't think I've seen.
And it's one of the few, other than the Dalek invasion of Earth and the Rescue, stories from that era that's actually set in the future explicitly. Actually, if you think about it, it's the only story. It's the first story that's set in the future. Because
interesting.
Unearthly Child, obviously the past. The Daleks somewhere, not specific. Edge of Destruction, just on the TARDIS. Marco Polo, historical. Keys of Marinus, Alien Planet. Who knows when? Aztecs in the past. The Sensorite is actually the first show that is like, oh, this is Earth's future when like interstellar travel is a thing.
Huh. Well, I expect to see lots of spaceships with Union flags. That's my guess. But yeah, I love coming to these things completely unspoiled.
Yeah.
Even though they were broadcast in 1964, so excited.
Well, it's a 6-parter, and judging on my sleep patterns back then, I think episodes 4 to 6 are unspoiled for me. So
okay,
we'll see.
That's what we've got to watch out for. I will take some no-dos before venturing into the second half of the Sensorites.
Alrighty. Well, Chris, this has been fun talking about the rescue. I'm really excited to go into more Hartnell stuff with you. I want to thank everybody for listening, hanging out with us to reminisce about Doctor Who. This is Pull to Open. It's a podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. In case you're encountering this on a web embed or, in some clip somewhere.
Yeah, or a web planet.
Ooh, a web planet. Yes. Very dangerous. If you're in the
That's where it'll take
galaxy.
us next. Now I've said that.
Yeah. We're available on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're on Google. We're on Breaker. We're on all the good podcast platforms. Check us out there. Check us out on TikTok at Pull to Open. On Twitter at Pull to Open 63. Also Pull to Open 63 on Instagram. Hang out there. Like our stuff. Leave a comment. Come to your podcast service and leave us a review. We'd love it. We'll even read your review out on the podcast if you do so. So that would be an awesome thing for everyone. Give us a follow. Say something, and we will see you next time.
All right.
Take care, folks.